Good afternoon. Out of practice. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the October 1 meeting of the Chatham Finance Committee pursuant to Governor Healy's March 29, 2023 signing of the Acts of 23, extending certain COVID-19 measures adapted during this state of emergency, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. This meeting of the Chatham Finance Committee is being conducted in person and via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. Reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 508-945-4410, again 508-945-4410, and enter conference ID 367-739-33 £. 367-739-33 £. Or one may join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on Chatham TV, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide real-time access. We'll post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. All right, we are going to have a little roll call, but then we're going to consider a proposed amendment to the town's budget and financial management policies. So, Tommy Doan.
Here.
Barbara Madison.
Here.
John Pappalardo, I know, is absent. Joanne Sprague.
Here.
Eddie Young.
Here.
Kristen Andres, negative. Tracy Shields is negative. Eric Whiteley.
Here.
And the chair is present. Okay. Consider amending the town's budget and financial management policies. Carrie, would you like to start us out, please?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
So this was brought forward by the Select Board member, Dean Nicastro, and it's an amendment to our financial policies on page 11 by adding the paragraph called, it's for Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion. The town will strive to limit to circumstances of financial exigency or housekeeping purposes the exclusion of debt under Proposition 2.5, Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Sections 21C, in reliance on a ballot question approval that occurs at an election that precedes town meeting action, to authorize the proposed borrowing notwithstanding any legal authority to make such reliance. So that is basically what's going on.
Can you provide us some context? I know Selectman Nicastro is here. Perhaps we can ask Dean to come up to the mic and provide some context or background behind the proposal.
Do you want to go or do you want me to?
I'm happy to do it.
Okay. Okay.
If you had something.
I was just going to say this was kind of brought up just for the last two ballot questions that were authorized. So at town meeting, they failed, and then at the ballot, they passed. So then they brought forward another special town meeting to try to, to see if the town people would pass.
Right. And that's happened, twice in the last 3 years, I think? Twice in the last year.
Twice, yep,
With respect to the COA
yep,
and then the recent vote.
yep.
Dean, would you like to edify us with your thinking behind this, please?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for calling a meeting of the Finance Committee so promptly after this has been referred to you by the Select Board. That's fine. The Select Board has not taken a position on this yet. They simply honored my request unanimously to refer this to you and to the town's financial advisors for a recommendation or comment, and I think Carrie will have something to say about where the financial advisors stand on this. So I submitted this, and I was inspired by the two special town meetings that were called within approximately 1 year's time after a bonding article had failed to get a 2/3 vote at the annual town meeting, and the Select Board called a special town meeting after that to take advantage of a successful ballot question. As you know, there are basically two things involved in these borrowings. One is whether to make the borrowing, which requires a 2/3 vote of the legislative body of the town, and that takes place at town meeting. and a simple majority vote of the voters on a ballot question to exclude the borrowing from Proposition 2.5, so it doesn't get embedded in the tax rate permanently. And I voted to call the special town meeting after 1610 Main Street was defeated by one vote, including a reconsideration of one vote back a year and a half ago or so. And I would have voted to call that special town meeting even if the vote had been one vote in the other direction. I did not vote to call this most recent special town meeting, but I did support the article when the meeting was called. The traditional way that Chatham has conducted these borrowings is to first go to town meeting and get a vote, get a 2/3 vote, and then have the ballot question. Some towns do it in reverse. We have not. It's perfectly legal to do it as long as, in reverse, as long as the ballot question is consistent with the article. In the case of the special town meeting for 1610 Main Street, there was a pure coincidence, or almost a perfect coincidence, in the language for the ballot question and the article that came before town meeting voters. In this most recent one, the ballot question was more inclusive of multiple projects, as you recall, for that $11 million bond issue. The ballot questions are generally nonspecific. So I don't think it's a great policy. I don't think it inspires much confidence in the taxpayers and voters of the town to be calling these special town meetings on a routine basis. I do think there are circumstances where a special town meeting should be called, and that's within the discretion of the select board. And in the case of the most recent special town meeting, we had an honest difference opinion among the board members. It was called by a 3-2 vote. Mr. Metters and I voted not to call the special town meeting. I personally wasn't convinced that the article, which I supported, was urgent enough to justify not waiting until May. Others felt differently, and I respect that. So it occurred to me that something should be done so that we don't get into a habit of doing this every time somebody's unhappy because their borrowing didn't get the 2/3 at town meeting and they wanted a second shot without having to go to another town election. And the options were, for dealing with this, were to prohibit it outright, which I don't think is good policy. I think there should be exceptions. And also, that would require, in my opinion, I didn't consult with town council, but I'm convinced it would have required a charter change, which could happen. I, as an individual select board member under state law in Massachusetts, can initiate a charter change, and it has to go to town meeting, whether the select board wants to or not. No one's ever done that. I've thought of doing that occasionally from time to time on some issue or another, perhaps before I finish my time as a select board member. I might be doing that sometime, but in this instance, I don't want to prohibit this practice. I want to simply discourage it as a routine endeavor. So that's the purpose behind it. The language is not a prohibition. It's really aspirational. I refer to it in the cover memo that I think was disseminated to you. I won't read the whole memo, as hortatory in nature. And I don't wish to tie the hands of the town officials or the select board. I intentionally use the word exigency, because I don't want to limit it. I don't want to limit the exceptions to situations of emergency, and exigency is a broader category that includes situations that might not be emergent but might be urgent. And I also think there may be some housekeeping purposes for which the town would be prudent to call a special town meeting in these circumstances. So what I propose is to amend the town budget and financial management policies over which the select board has authority on your recommendation. I think traditionally we've gotten 2 votes, one from your board and one from our board, whenever we've amended these policies, and we amended them relatively recently. So that's what's before you. I'm not here to, frankly, I'm not here to urge you to vote in either direction. I'm just trying to explain what my thinking was. I'm happy to answer any questions. I will point out for information that the Cape Cod Chronicle felt this was a significant enough issue that they effectively endorsed it in a recent editorial. But that's just for your information. So that's what I have. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Terrific. Thank you, Dean. Carrie, anything you'd like to add to this?
Yeah, so the financial advisors responded, and they think that this is permissive and should be fine. And town council said it's certainly legal, especially where it's just a non-binding policy. I don't know if Jill has anything to add, but those are the responses we've received.
Perfect. Thank you. Let's
welcome.
check in with the town manager, see if she has anything to add. Jill, are you there? Okay, maybe not right now. Questions or comments?
I am
Oh,
here for some reason. My fingers are sticky, no why. Can you hear me?
we can hear you.
Okay. Carrie, just to elaborate, I think Town Council Jay had said something more, and I just don't have it in front of me.
I just have that
Do you
it's
have
certainly
something?
legal, especially where it is a non-binding policy. Let me see.
Jill, while Carrie looks for that, can you
Sure.
edify us generally on what you think Jay may have added?
Yeah, so when we go out for our bonding, the S&P Global does review our budget and financial policies. And so it's important that whatever we put in there that we comply with. And if something is permissive, then we just need to make sure the wording is in there appropriately. Otherwise, I don't want a note against our bond rating for non-compliance with the town's budget and financial policies. And I don't think that will be the case here. I just wanted to note that because that's always important whenever we update our budget and financial policies.
No, agreed.
So I have no issue with
Understood.
this.
Okay, thank you.
So town council also said, with that said, as council, I am always wary of setting a policy that limits even superficially the options of a select board that I represent. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Comments or questions? Joanne, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that the townspeople have a right to petition the selectmen for a special town meeting. And I also believe that the selectmen already have the responsibility of making the decision of whether to put that request and ask for a special town meeting. The selectmen, when they are elected by the people, take a pledge of responsibility to these people who voted them into office. And I think we don't need to remind them of that and by adding special language to make sure they watch their P's and Q's before they attempt to set up a special meeting. I think they already have that responsibility. I see no need, from my point of view, to change the language of the financial management policies. So I would vote against this.
Thank you. Tracy, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree in that I would vote against this. To me, our legislative process is already sufficiently cumbersome. And I don't mean that in necessarily a negative way, like it should be to affect major change or financial changes. But if anything, as a legislative body, I I believe that we should endeavor to be as responsive and nimble as possible. And given that this is legal, I don't see why we would, even if it is permissive, intend to suggest limitations or try to discourage future bodies from responding to the townspeople. I think, to me, it doesn't seem like some great wrong was affected. I think in both of the cases of the recent special town meetings, the general will of the town was actualized. In my perspective and how I view and interact with people in town, in terms of there being a positive or negative view of the outcome reflecting the majority of people. I will say I tend to, in general, think that a voting minority already has sufficient power in elections, in that, that it is a 2/3. I get that. But especially in a situation where, to me, this was an exigent, this most recent, because we were up against a timeline. So I think, to me, this verbiage would encourage the town to take longer and perhaps need to spend more money to have additional elections when they're not necessary.
Thank you. Barbara?
I can see the reasons that both Joanne and Tracy have outlined. However, and possibly if it hadn't happened twice in the last year, I could be convinced to think differently. But since it has, I am going to support this. Whether it's legal or not, and I understand that it is legal, it's not a good look when a percentage of our townspeople think that we're trying to circumvent their will that was presented at town meeting by holding a special town meeting later when the same people are not there, and we do manage to get around what the town meeting initially said.
All right, thank you. Andy, did I see your hand go up?
Yeah, I'm curious about the question of the town's voters' inability to petition for a special town meeting, how this would affect that.
I'm not town council, but I used to be. I don't think it would affect it at all, because the townspeople have a right under state law, I think it may even be in the Constitution, but I'm not sure, to call for a special town meeting with 200 signatures at any time. So I think that.
I've been previously reported as saying essentially this is a political decision, with this going either way. Town meeting, and do not support any given article, have even more people showing up to vote than we get at town meeting.
And I've written to them, special town meeting, seemingly of, and so administration and the selectmen lumped ability, were thoughtful, and I think the selectmen were thoughtful, as they should. All the exigencies take the oath of office, insist that they have even more setting financial policies. So I will vote against this.
About legislative body of town meeting vote, and it's legally permissible.
Verbiage is less about the
Fight that the voter has, the taxpayer who's paying for whatever goes on that ballot or whatever goes on the town meeting warrant, is the right to vote, that because they're going to be paying for it, and they don't want to pay maybe for a bunch of projects when they only want one. And by asking for another meeting to do it the way they want to do it, is just giving them the right. Just recognizing the right they already have. That's the only right taxpayers have against an administration or a board of selectmen to get things the way they want them, because they're the ones who pay the bills for all of this. And to tap the selectman on the shoulder and say, well, now make sure you study this thoroughly, that's insulting to me, to the voters who voted the selectmen into office to make these kind of decisions. They're supposed to be careful about what they do. That's to be understood within their job. So to look at this as though the town meeting, that the voters ask for too many special town meetings, I think is utterly wrong. They have every right, if they're up in arms and think they need something corrected, they have every right to ask for it to be corrected.
Although I will point out that it's not always that the voters are asking for special town meetings. In recent history, half of the ones, one of two, if I'm not mistaken, was called for by the select board following the defeat of the first initiative at town meeting. So anyway, just a footnote. Other comments, observations?
We have a disagreement.
That's not a first. That's what we're here for. Andy, please.
I was thinking about a slightly different question. Can any given issue that brought up at a town, can it bind a future town meeting?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Oh,
Well, one of the things that a few people have said is, how dare the town bring up an issue that's already been decided by a town meeting? Well, you just had another town meeting and it decided the issue differently.
Different issue.
Yes,
11.4 versus 4.
sure. On the other hand, it's at the core, it still had the same single issue, right? And I mean, I think philosophically, it's difficult to imagine the town's legislative body being able to bind a future town meeting. In other words, prohibit them from dealing with something
right.
that they themselves have already, in their minds, dealt with.
Yeah.
And
I can see that. I guess from my perspective, and maybe we're getting too far into the weeds,
maybe.
this ultimately is a timing issue to me, right? It's a question, do we do this in September after a May prospective defeat, or do we do it 8 months later, the following May? Doesn't preclude further action, refinement, whatever. It just kicks it down the road a little bit, which may not always be such a bad idea, to provide more time for consideration, reflection, refinement, et cetera. So, Joanne?
To me, it's an issue. You decide to do it or not to do it. If it's not good now, it's not good 6 months from now. If it's good now, it's good 6 months from now. It's not a good issue. It's against
Right.
democracy.
Well, that's your view. We are obviously having a difference of opinion.
That's what
That's fine.
microphone's for.
Tracy, please.
Just as a comment on the question of binding a future meeting, that seems to me very counter-democratic, because the circumstances change, perhaps the financial picture changes, the demographic has changed, like the actual body of who is Chatham and who is paying taxes may have changed. And that can change, whether we're talking about a few months or 10 years.
But I guess I don't understand how, again, maybe we're too far in the weeds, but I don't understand how this is binding. I don't understand that any of this is binding.
That remark was mostly in response to people who were simply expressed outrage at the idea that a future town meeting changed a decision. Sorry,
Can happen.
that's what town meeting does.
Exactly.
And
Right.
and so, but I think we are getting a little too far in the weeds on that. I mean, it's not a, I extend, Mr. Chairman, I accept more of your argument over timing than anything else, right? It's not necessary to bring it up at a special town meeting. I mean, truly, unless it is something of extremely pressing nature. Why bother doing that? Save it up for the annual town meeting. Presumably, many of the same people will still be there, and everybody has had a chance to thoroughly work through the arguments. Thank you.
Eric, please.
Is it time to make a motion, Mr. Chairman? I would move that the Finance Committee support the language change as presented to us today.
Okay, do we have a second? All right, so a vote in favor of supporting Selectman DeCastro's proposed amendment to the town's financial and budget policies. Tracy?
No.
Andy?
Yes.
I'm going by bench rank rather than what's on my list. Tommy?
Yes.
Thank you. Barbara?
Yes.
Joanne?
No.
Eric?
Yes.
And the chair's in favor. So 6-1. Sorry, 2, I'm sorry. God. Came over in. Don't ask me to balance my checkbook, apparently. All right. Yeah, thanks, Tommy. You can be in the next chair. All right, anything further that anybody wants to bring up?
We have a calendar, I gather.
We have a proposed budgetary calendar that, did everybody in the committee get it, Carrie, do we know?
No, but I can send it out.
If you could, please, that'd be
Yep.
great.
And then we'll have to come up with some dates as well for meetings.
Yeah,
I think, don't we start with a budget kickoff that I think is October 22nd?
we've got the budget summit later this month, correct?
October 22nd.
And then I think the budget will get circulated around January 16 or 18,
Yep.
and we'll start off from that. We've got about 4, maybe 5 weeks to get our initial recommendations back. So we'll get the calendar circulated to everybody, so we'll know what's going on.
Yep, I'll send that out today.
But we already know we need to circle the 22nd.
Yeah,
Okay.
yep, budget summit.
Yes.
Be there, be square. Okay, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. Tommy in favor?
Yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
Joanne?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Tracy?
Yep.
Eric?
Yes.
Chair's in favor. That's a better way to do it. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you.